The kiss, in the symbolic language of the psyche, is more than a physical gesture. It is an initiation, one that touches the deepest archetypal layers of the human experience. Within Jungian psychology, we understand this through the activation of archetypes, especially that of the lover. The archetypes are not merely poetic metaphors. They are innate, universal patterns that structure the human psyche. They exist within the collective unconscious, shared across cultures and times. When we speak of the lover archetype, we speak of something much deeper than romance. We refer to a psychological force that pulls us toward beauty, connection, union, and even the divine. The kiss, when viewed through the lens of Jungian psychology, carries a weight that transcends its external appearance. It is a moment in which two worlds meet, not just two people, but the internal opposites within the individual. Jung often emphasized the importance of the union of opposites in the journey toward wholeness. This kiss, this simple act, becomes an emblem of that larger psychological process. Within it, the tension of the opposite, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, spirit and instinct, are briefly resolved in a moment of intimate synthesis. This union is not necessarily about physical attraction or emotional sentimentality. Rather, it is a symbolic act that reflects the psyche's inherent need to reconcile its divided parts. Every individual carries opposing forces within. The conscious mind operates in clarity, logic, and identity, but below the surface lies the unconscious, irrational, fluid, full of desire, fear, memory, and myth. The kiss often arrives at a moment when the boundary between these two realms becomes porous. One feels a stirring not easily explained by reason, a warmth, a tremor, a pull from somewhere ancient. In that moment, the kiss acts as a symbolic bridge between the known and the unknown. The kiss is an outward gesture, but the reaction it sparks occurs internally, deep within the symbolic architecture of the psyche. When two opposites meet, there is often conflict. The psyche, like nature, resists fusion. Yet within Jungian thought, individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires these opposites not only to confront each other, but to work together. The kiss, then, becomes a psychological experiment in unity. The ego, which clings to certainty and control, momentarily surrenders to a deeper rhythm. The inner masculine animus and inner feminine anima engage. Whether one is biologically male or female, both energies reside within. These energies are not limited to gender. They are polarities of function, one active, one receptive, one solar, one lunar. In the kiss, these energies come face to face, not only externally but also internally, within the person experiencing it. There is also the timeless image of the alchemical wedding, the sacred marriage of opposites, which fascinated Jung. In alchemy, lead is transformed into gold only when the masculine sun and the feminine moon unite in the vessel. The kiss may be interpreted as a microcosmic version of this sacred process. In that fleeting contact, something inside the person is momentarily purified. A sense of completeness arises, not because the other person has fulfilled them, but because the self has, for a moment, ceased to be divided. The feeling that follows the kiss is not merely romantic, it is psychological resonance. It is the echo of something ancient, perhaps even eternal, moving through the corridors of the present self. When this moment occurs, one may not consciously register it in symbolic terms, but the unconscious does. It reacts, swells, sometimes even overflows. There may be tears, confusion, laughter, or silence. The psyche, in its symbolic language, responds with emotion. The reason such a moment lingers is not due to memory alone, but because something meaningful has taken place beneath the surface. The kiss, in awakening the lover archetype, simultaneously opens the gate between the opposites in the individual. It becomes both an outer event and an inner transformation. This union of opposites does not suggest that the individual is now complete, but rather that a step toward integration has occurred. It may be subtle, it may be fleeting, but it is real. Jung believed that the path to selfhood was paved with these experiences, encounters that disturb the status quo, that challenge the ego to evolve. The kiss does not fix the person, nor does it bind them to the other. What it does is activate a deeper awareness of what lies within: longing, unity, fragmentation, and potential. The feeling that follows is not about loss or gain. It is about recognition. Recognition that within the self exists the very same polarity that the kiss symbolizes externally. Such a moment cannot be planned. It happens organically, arising when the psyche is ripe for it. In that moment, the opposites, those forces that have long stood in tension, embrace, and from that embrace, the individual is changed. They may not understand it consciously. They may not know what to do with it, but the psyche remembers, and the kiss, though it may last only a few seconds, becomes a symbol that echoes far beyond its own duration. In Jungian psychology, transformation is central to the journey of the psyche. The kiss, though often seen as a mundane or romantic gesture, becomes a moment of deep symbolic transformation when viewed through the lens of analytical psychology. It mirrors the ancient process of alchemy, where base materials were believed to be refined into gold, a metaphor Jung used extensively to describe psychological change. When one experiences that sudden, vivid feeling after a kiss, it is not just an emotional reaction. It is the psyche's acknowledgement that something has shifted. The ordinary is no longer ordinary. The internal chemistry of the soul has been stirred, and the transformation begins. Alchemy is not about literal gold. In Jung's view, it is about the evolution of consciousness, the raw, unformed parts of ourselves, the instinctual, the wounded, the unacknowledged are like lead. Through symbolic experiences, especially those that shake or awaken the heart, the soul begins its slow process of refinement. The kiss, in this sense, acts as a catalytic agent. It touches a part of us that is not rational, not intellectual, but deeply human and ancient. Suddenly, one feels more alive, more vulnerable, more connected. There is heat, uncertainty, joy, or even fear. These emotions are the bubbling of the psychic cauldron, the signals that the base material of the self has entered into alchemical change. This transformation does not occur in the moment alone, but in the echo that follows. That lingering feeling, a strange blend of yearning, clarity, confusion, or even peace, tells us that something in the unconscious has been brought to the surface. The psyche speaks not in words, but in symbols and emotions. The kiss, therefore, is a symbol that has activated a deeper process. It may call forth old memories, forgotten desires, or hidden hopes. These rising contents were always present, lying dormant in the shadows of the unconscious. The kiss simply woke them. What makes this moment so potent is that it cannot be faked. True transformation in Jungian terms requires authentic psychic material, an encounter that touches the soul, not just the senses. In alchemy, the vessel must be sealed tightly, and the ingredients must be subjected to heat and pressure over time. Similarly, the feeling after a kiss is not an end in itself. It is the beginning of something, the first spark. The psyche must now hold that feeling, reflect on it, and integrate it. Often this means facing discomfort, because transformation is not always gentle. It may reveal unmet needs, unresolved wounds, or aspects of the self that have long been denied. This is the fire of alchemy. Jung emphasized that true change is circular, not linear. The psyche spirals inward and outward, revisiting old themes in new ways. After such a moment, one may find themselves revisiting questions of identity, purpose, or connection. They may feel a subtle shift in how they view the world or themselves. This is the alchemical gold beginning to form, not perfection, but consciousness. The kiss, a brief physical act, becomes a portal to self-awareness. It collapses time for a moment, connecting the ancient with the present, the instinctual with the spiritual. One of the most powerful aspects of this transformation is that it is internal. The kiss may involve another person, but the alchemical work belongs to the individual. What matters is not what the kiss meant to the other, but what it stirred within. That is the true site of transformation. The external act is the spark, the internal response is the flame. The gold, the result of this subtle process, is a clearer, deeper sense of self. It is not about being completed by another, but about being awakened to a more whole version of oneself. In alchemy, the process must be repeated. Each transformation lays the foundation for the next. Likewise, the feeling after the kiss may fade, but the change it initiated continues. The psyche absorbs the symbol and slowly reshapes itself around it. Over time, the person may come to see that moment not just as a romantic memory, but as a psychological turning point. It was when the soul reminded them of its depth, its mystery, and its power to change. That is the alchemy of the kiss, a transformation not of matter, but of meaning. The feeling that rises after a kiss can often bring with it a strange and unexpected mix of emotions: excitement, vulnerability, joy, fear, even a touch of sorrow. These feelings may seem out of proportion to the event itself, and yet they are very real. Within Jungian psychology, such a reaction often points to the illumination of the shadow, the part of the psyche that holds what the ego has disowned, denied, or pushed into the unconscious. The kiss, though gentle and seemingly simple, can strike directly at the boundaries of the ego, exposing parts of the self that have been hidden in darkness. The shadow is not evil by nature. It is composed of everything within us that we do not want to see, everything we were taught to reject or fear. It contains impulses, longings, gifts, and wounds. In many ways, the shadow is the neglected twin of the persona, the mask we wear for the world. While the persona seeks approval, belonging, and structure, the shadow contains raw authenticity. It is instinctual, emotional, and often chaotic. A kiss can pierce the persona with surprising force, tearing open the constructed identity and allowing a flood of unconscious material to rush in. The person who feels disoriented or deeply moved after such an encounter is not being irrational. They are undergoing a moment of truth. The kiss becomes a mirror, not of the other person, but of the self. It reflects the inner content that has been waiting for acknowledgement. One may suddenly feel inadequate, overly vulnerable, or strangely elated. These are not merely reactions to the external event. They are messages from the unconscious, now illuminated by the light of an intense emotional experience. This is why people often say they didn't expect to feel so much, or felt something they couldn't explain, in the moments following a kiss. What they are feeling is the contact point between their conscious identity and their deeper emotional truth. That truth, often locked away in the shadow, finds a moment of release. The kiss acts like a key, opening a door to memories, projections, and unprocessed feelings. Sometimes these feelings are positive and enriching. Other times they can be painful, uncomfortable, or even frightening. Jung emphasized the necessity of facing the shadow on the path to individuation. He warned that what we do not make conscious will control us from the unconscious. Therefore, any experience that brings the shadow into view is an opportunity for growth, if we have the courage to engage with it. The feeling after a kiss, especially if it lingers and haunts, is one such opportunity. It asks us not to escape or dismiss the feeling, but to explore it. What did it awaken? What old wound did it touch? What desire did it reveal? The difficulty is that the ego often resists such moments. It wants to return to stability, to make sense of everything within its existing framework. It may attempt to rationalize the feeling, blame it on hormones, or brush it aside as nothing. But the unconscious does not speak in rational language. It speaks through mood, image, sensation, and dream. The feeling that arises after the kiss may not make logical sense, but it holds symbolic truth. It is the voice of the hidden self, the shadow rising to say, "I am here." For some, this awakening may stir feelings of unworthiness or shame. The shadow often carries emotional residue from the past, times when love was withheld, when affection was unsafe, when vulnerability led to pain. These residues are not erased by time. They remain in the psyche, waiting to be felt and processed. A single moment of intimacy can brush against these old imprints, bringing them to the surface. In doing so, it creates discomfort, but also potential. What is exposed can finally be healed. At the same time, the shadow contains untapped vitality. It holds forgotten strengths, passions, and dreams. When a kiss awakens the shadow, it can also reintroduce us to our own capacity for feeling deeply, for risking connection, for moving beyond numbness. The emotions that rise in the aftermath may be turbulent, but they are also proof that the heart is still alive. The light that shines into the shadow may at first reveal darkness, but with time it uncovers gold, what Jung called the gold in the shadow. The part of ourselves that can bring us back to wholeness. To feel shaken by a kiss is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that something real has occurred, something honest. The unconscious does not react to superficial gestures, only to symbols of depth. The kiss, if it reaches into the soul, becomes one such symbol, and the feelings that follow are not just echoes of that moment. They are the voice of the shadow, asking to be seen, heard, and embraced. When the kiss ends and the body falls still, there is often a silence that is not empty, but full. It carries within it a weight, a sense that something ancient has stirred inside. This sensation, which lingers quietly or crashes like a wave, is the psychic trace of an archetype being activated. In Jungian psychology, archetypes are not abstract concepts or poetic devices. They are living, dynamic patterns that shape the human experience from within the collective unconscious. They do not belong to one person, one culture, or one moment. They are timeless forms that express themselves through human behavior, relationships, dreams, and emotions. Among them, the lover is one of the most powerful and transformative. The lover archetype does not refer merely to romantic or sexual affection. It is a symbolic expression of connection, desire, beauty, longing, and the aching pull toward unity. It speaks to the soul's deep need to reach out beyond the boundaries of the self, to touch and be touched, to feel profoundly alive. The kiss, especially one that resonates deeply, serves as a vessel for this archetype to rise into consciousness. The intense feeling that follows is not just about physical contact, it is the aftershock of the lover archetype moving through the psyche. It awakens the part of the soul that remembers wholeness, that seeks communion, not just with another person, but with existence itself. The lover is not bound to one object. It lives within the imagination, the senses, the longing for meaning. When activated, this archetype draws attention not only to the person who triggered it, but to the quality of experience that arises from it. A moment of beauty in nature, a moving piece of music, or a meaningful gaze can all carry the same energetic signature. But the kiss, being both physical and symbolic, delivers the archetype directly into the body. The feeling that follows is not simply emotional, it is archetypal. It bypasses surface logic and touches something more primal, more universal. This activation is rarely simple, because archetypes are so vast and complex, they often flood the conscious mind with contradictions. One might feel joy and grief at the same time, or experience a sense of elevation alongside fear. These conflicting feelings are not signs of confusion, they are signs that the psyche is responding to a deeper symbolic truth. The lover, when awakened, does not operate according to rational or moral structures. It dissolves boundaries, invites risk, and speaks in the language of intensity. That post-kiss feeling, full of mystery and weight, is the psyche's response to being touched by this force. The presence of the lover archetype also stirs the soul's desire for transcendence. This does not necessarily mean a spiritual or religious experience, but rather a sense of stepping outside the ordinary into a space where meaning feels heightened, where time seems suspended, and where the self feels both more itself and more connected to something greater. The kiss in its symbolic fullness becomes a threshold experience. The world is not the same on the other side. Something internal has shifted, and the individual now carries a new awareness, perhaps subtle, perhaps overwhelming, that they are part of a larger dance of connection and longing. Yet, it is important to recognize that archetypes do not function in isolation. The activation of the lover often brings other archetypes into proximity: the child who longs for safety and attention, the orphan who fears abandonment, the seeker who pursues truth and wholeness. This is why the feeling after the kiss can be layered and complex. It is not just the lover who wakes, but an entire constellation of symbolic energies that begin to move within the psyche. This movement is what gives the moment such depth. It is not simply about affection, it is about the soul being reminded of its own complexity. Jung believed that when archetypes rise into consciousness, they must be integrated or they will overpower the individual. This is especially true with the lover. If one is unaware of what has been stirred, they may become consumed by the emotion, idealize the person who awakened it, or seek endlessly to recreate the feeling without understanding its inner origin. But when the individual recognizes that the feeling is not solely about the other, but about the archetype within themselves, they gain power. They begin to see that the kiss did not create the feeling, it revealed it. The lover is already within, the kiss simply summoned it, and the feeling that lingers is not a message from the other person, but from the soul itself, reminding the conscious mind of its longing to connect, to feel, to know beauty, not only in another, but in the self. The kiss is over, but the archetype remains alive, whispering its truths beneath the surface, inviting the individual to follow that feeling into deeper waters. The feeling that arises after a kiss often seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It may arrive in a sudden warmth, a tightness in the chest, a stillness in the breath, or a cascade of emotions that feel disproportionate to the moment. But within the language of Jungian psychology, this response is not excessive, it is symbolic. In this framework, the kiss acts as a psychic trigger that unlocks emotional memory. These are not always memories in the literal sense, as in remembered events. They can also be emotional echoes, resonances of patterns formed in early relationships, gestures stored in the body, fragments of story that live beneath conscious awareness. The kiss, charged with intimacy, crosses the boundary between the present and the personal past, stirring the emotional contents that live in the unconscious and bringing them forward with startling intensity. Jung observed that the unconscious does not forget. It stores experiences in layers, especially those that the conscious mind has ignored, suppressed, or simply never processed. Early experiences of love, touch, abandonment, acceptance, or confusion become the silent architecture of one's inner world. When a moment of intimacy occurs, such as a kiss, it acts like a stone dropped into a still pool. The ripples move outward, but they also stir up what lies at the bottom. Emotional memory rises, sometimes gently, sometimes in waves. What seems like a reaction to one moment is actually the surfacing of many. This is why people often say, "I don't know why I felt so much," or "it hit me harder than I expected." The kiss touches not only the lips but the layers of self that have been waiting to feel again. These emotional layers are often implicit, embedded in the body rather than the mind. The skin, breath, muscles, and heartbeat all carry the marks of past experiences, of closeness, safety, rejection, longing. The body remembers even when the mind does not. The kiss, being a deeply sensory act, bypasses the intellect and accesses this embodied knowledge directly. It can return a person in an instant to a feeling they had long forgotten, a feeling of being cared for, or of being hurt, or of being seen. These moments may not be attached to clear images or specific memories, but the emotional signature is undeniable. The body signals this has happened before, even if the conscious mind cannot name when or where. At times, this surfacing of emotional memory brings joy and peace. One may feel flooded with gratitude or a deep sense of belonging. But at other times, the memories are more difficult. The kiss may remind the unconscious of a time when affection was uncertain, when trust was broken, or when love came with conditions. The present moment reactivates the past, not as a deliberate reflection, but as a spontaneous return. This does not mean that the kiss itself is wrong or harmful. It means that it has opened a door the psyche has kept closed. Jung emphasized that all such returns are opportunities. When emotional memory comes to the surface, the individual has a chance to feel, reflect, and integrate it, rather than continue carrying it unconsciously. In many cases, the person who has been kissed becomes a symbolic figure. They may unintentionally represent a parent, a past lover, or even an imagined ideal. The emotion they evoke is not always about them as individuals, but about the archetypal roles they step into within the psyche's narrative. This symbolic overlay is not something the conscious mind chooses. It emerges from the deep reservoir of psychic material each person carries. A single kiss may carry the weight of many others, not just in a person's personal past, but in their emotional lineage. Through this symbolic lens, the kiss is not merely personal, it is mythic. It is the reenactment of an ancient pattern of closeness, fear, trust, separation, and longing that plays out again and again in the human experience. When the feeling after the kiss lingers, it is often because the emotional memory that was stirred has not yet found its place. The unconscious has presented a piece of material, and the conscious mind has not fully integrated it. This creates an emotional echo, a sense of incompletion or open-endedness. The psyche is asking to be listened to, not just emotionally but symbolically. What does this feeling remind you of? Who were you in that moment? Who were you remembering without knowing it? In asking these questions, one does not diminish the kiss, but deepens its meaning. The moment becomes more than a memory, it becomes a message. And so, what follows the kiss is rarely just about desire or affection. It is often about memory, emotional, symbolic, bodily. The kiss acts as a key unlocking hidden rooms in the house of the psyche. It invites what has been buried to rise, not to haunt, but to heal. It is not simply that the kiss awakens emotion. It reawakens the emotional stories that made us, asking us gently, or sometimes fiercely, to feel them again. When a kiss ends and the body remains still, it is often the soul that begins to move. In Jungian psychology, dreams are not random hallucinations or meaningless brain activity. They are meaningful messages from the unconscious, filled with symbols, metaphors, and emotions that the waking self may not yet be ready to confront directly. The feeling that lingers after a kiss, sometimes quiet, sometimes overwhelming, is fertile ground for the unconscious to speak. This feeling becomes a bridge into the dream world, where hidden desires, fears, and internal conflicts rise in symbolic form. The kiss awakens not just the senses, but the soul's capacity to dream more vividly, more honestly, more profoundly. Jung saw the dream as a theater of the inner world. In it, the unconscious stages scenes, characters, and events that reflect the psyche's current state and its deeper longings. A kiss, particularly one that resonates emotionally, provides rich material for this psychic stage. It is not just the memory of the act that appears in dreams, but its symbolic resonance, the feeling of opening, of risk, of contact. The kiss may appear again in sleep, transformed. It may be with a different person, in a different place, under strange or magical circumstances. These variations are not distortions. They are the language of the unconscious refining and revealing what the ego cannot fully grasp. Often, dreams that follow such moments are charged with archetypal energy. One might dream of water, flight, doors opening, or strangers bearing familiar faces. These are not random images. They are the unconscious attempting to metabolize the emotional truth stirred by the kiss. Water may symbolize emotional depth or the flow of unconscious material. Flight may represent liberation or the fear of losing grounding. A door opening could reflect a psychological threshold being crossed, just as the kiss may have marked a passage into a more vulnerable or awakened state. The dream takes the raw emotional residue of the kiss and gives it form, texture, and meaning through these symbols. What makes this process especially powerful is that it often operates without conscious intention. One does not dream because they want to, or because they think the kiss was important. The unconscious decides when and how to speak. If the kiss stirred something genuine, the psyche responds naturally, offering dream material that both reflects and deepens the experience. This dream material is not always soothing. Sometimes it is strange, disorienting, or even frightening. It may expose anxieties about closeness, reveal hidden grief, or show internal conflicts about identity, desire, or trust. But all of this is valuable. Jung insisted that the shadow, the wound, and the dream all carry the same message. Wholeness requires truth. In this way, the feeling after a kiss is not just an emotional residue, it is psychic activation. It opens the gate between the conscious and unconscious realms, inviting the soul to process, digest, and expand. The dream world becomes a sacred space in which the emotions of the kiss are not just remembered, but explored and reimagined. Jung often spoke of the compensatory function of dreams, how they balance the one-sidedness of consciousness. If one dismisses the kiss as trivial, the dream may return it with overwhelming intensity. If one idealizes the moment, the dream may present its shadow. This back and forth is not contradiction, it is integration. It is also deeply personal. Two people sharing the same kiss will not dream the same dream. Each psyche reacts through its own symbolic lens, shaped by its history, traumas, desires, and myths. One person may dream of reuniting with a lost lover. Another may dream of being pursued or watched. Another may find themselves in a landscape that feels achingly familiar but cannot be named. These images matter. They are the unconscious revealing its story in symbols that cannot be spoken directly. The kiss becomes not an isolated event, but a portal into the inner narrative that has been quietly unfolding all along. Over time, if one pays attention, these dreams can guide the individual toward deeper self-understanding. They reveal not only how the kiss felt, but why it mattered. They may uncover unresolved grief, unexpressed longing, or untapped potential. They may suggest new directions, new questions, or old truths that are finally ready to be felt. In this sense, the kiss is not just the beginning of a connection with another. It is the ignition of an inner dialogue. The feeling that follows, so easily dismissed or misunderstood, is actually the call of the unconscious preparing to speak. And in dreams, it often speaks most clearly. When a kiss ends and the body remains still, it is often the soul that begins to move. In Jungian psychology, dreams are not random hallucinations or meaningless brain activity. They are meaningful messages from the unconscious, filled with symbols, metaphors, and emotions that the waking self may not yet be ready to confront directly. The feeling that lingers after a kiss, sometimes quiet, sometimes overwhelming, is fertile ground for the unconscious to speak. This feeling becomes a bridge into the dream world, where hidden desires, fears, and internal conflicts rise in symbolic form. The kiss awakens not just the senses, but the soul's capacity to dream more vividly, more honestly, more profoundly. Jung saw the dream as a theater of the inner world. In it, the unconscious stages scenes, characters, and events that reflect the psyche's current state and its deeper longing. A kiss, particularly one that resonates emotionally, provides rich material for this psychic stage. It is not just the memory of the act that appears in dreams, but its symbolic resonance, the feeling of opening, of risk, of contact. The kiss may appear again in sleep, transformed. It may be with a different person, in a different place, under strange or magical circumstances. These variations are not distortions. They are the language of the unconscious refining and revealing what the ego cannot fully grasp. Often, dreams that follow such moments are charged with archetypal energy. One might dream of water, flight, doors opening, or strangers bearing familiar faces. These are not random images. They are the unconscious attempting to metabolize the emotional truth stirred by the kiss. Water may symbolize emotional depth or the flow of unconscious material. Flight may represent liberation or the fear of losing grounding. A door opening could reflect a psychological threshold being crossed, just as the kiss may have marked a passage into a more vulnerable or awakened state. The dream takes the raw emotional residue of the kiss and gives it form, texture, and meaning through these symbols. What makes this process especially powerful is that it often operates without conscious intention. One does not dream because they want to, or because they think the kiss was important. The unconscious decides when and how to speak. If the kiss stirred something genuine, the psyche responds naturally, offering dream material that both reflects and deepens the experience. This dream material is not always soothing. Sometimes it is strange, disorienting, or even frightening. It may expose anxieties about closeness, reveal hidden grief, or show internal conflicts about identity, desire, or trust. But all of this is valuable. Jung insisted that the shadow, the wound, and the dream all carry the same message. Wholeness requires truth. In this way, the feeling after a kiss is not just an emotional residue. It is psychic activation. It opens the gate between the conscious and unconscious realms, inviting the soul to process, digest, and expand. The dream world becomes a sacred space in which the emotions of the kiss are not just remembered but explored and reimagined. Jung often spoke of the compensatory function of dreams, how they balance the one-sidedness of consciousness. If one dismisses the kiss as trivial, the dream may return it with overwhelming intensity. If one idealizes the moment, the dream may present its shadow. This back and forth is not contradiction, it is integration. It is also deeply personal. Two people sharing the same kiss will not dream the same dreams. Each psyche reacts through its own symbolic lens, shaped by its history, traumas, desires, and myths. One person may dream of reuniting with a lost lover. Another may dream of being pursued or watched. Another may find themselves in a landscape that feels achingly familiar but cannot be named. These images matter. They are the unconscious revealing its story in symbols that cannot be spoken directly. The kiss becomes not an isolated event, but a portal into the inner narrative that has been quietly unfolding all along. Over time, if one pays attention, these dreams can guide the individual toward deeper self-understanding. They reveal not only how the kiss felt, but why it mattered. They may uncover unresolved grief, unexpressed longing, or untapped potential. They may suggest new directions, new questions, or old truths that are finally ready to be felt. In this sense, the kiss is not just the beginning of a connection with another. It is the ignition of an inner dialogue. The feeling that follows, so easily dismissed or misunderstood, is actually the call of the unconscious preparing to speak. And in dreams, it often speaks most clearly. There are moments in life when an experience arrives not just to be felt, but to be remembered in a way that lingers beyond explanation. A kiss, especially one that touches something deeper in the psyche, often becomes such a moment. While its immediate sensations may pass, the emotional and symbolic trace it leaves behind enters the realm of what Jung might call active imagination, a living memory that transforms itself over time, becoming more than what it was. It is not simply about the lips or the context or the physicality. It is about how the moment integrates itself into one's inner world as something mythic, something quietly sacred. The kiss, in this sense, becomes part of the narrative one carries forward, an experience that teaches, changes, and deepens the psyche long after it has ended. Memory is not a static recording of events. It is alive, shifting in color and meaning with each recall. When a kiss enters the symbolic memory, it becomes layered with more than what happened. It becomes charged with what it meant, what it awakened, what it reminded one of, and what it continues to represent in the evolution of the self. The conscious mind might forget the exact day, or the weather, or the music that was playing, but the feeling, that distinct ache, warmth, or trembling, lives on. It becomes a metaphor within the personal myth. Jung understood life as a journey of individuation, a gradual unfolding of the self through symbolic events that carry the soul's deepest truths. A kiss that echoes in memory may be one such symbol, an emblem of transformation, intimacy, risk, or awakening. This kind of memory does not need to be relived in longing. It is not about pining for a return to that kiss, nor idealizing the person involved. Instead, it becomes a teacher. It reminds the psyche of what it means to feel fully, to be present, to open. Perhaps the kiss marked the first time in years that the heart had let its guard down. Perhaps it brought clarity to a desire long buried, or perhaps it shattered an illusion, revealing a truth that the conscious self had resisted. Whatever the case, it becomes an internalized experience, not just a memory of contact, but of contact with one's own soul. The kiss becomes a story not of two people, but of one person coming into alignment with a forgotten or undiscovered part of themselves. Time, too, plays its role. With distance, the symbolic weight of the kiss may grow heavier or lighter, depending on what one learns. It may become a turning point in retrospect. That was the moment I realized I was alive again. Or that kiss told me everything I was afraid to admit. Memory alchemizes raw experience into meaning, and meaning into insight. This transformation is rarely conscious. It happens quietly, in moments of reflection, in sudden dreams, or in a line of poetry that inexplicably brings tears to the eyes. The kiss, once just a moment, becomes part of a broader story of becoming. Its energy continues to move within the psyche like a small current in a vast sea. It also serves as a compass. The emotional memory of a kiss may guide future choices, not by dictating them, but by revealing what feels aligned or misaligned with the soul. One might find themselves comparing future intimacy to that moment, not in terms of replication, but in terms of resonance. Does this feel as honest? Is this contact real or masked? The remembered kiss becomes a point of inner reference, not because it was perfect, but because it was meaningful. Jung spoke of symbols as things that cannot be fully defined, but must be lived. The memory of the kiss, when held symbolically, continues to live in this way. It becomes a part of the mythic landscape of the inner world. Even if the relationship connected to the kiss never deepens or continues, its memory remains valid. Its impact is not erased by time or changed circumstances. It is carried within as a kind of psychic artifact, proof that the heart once opened, that something was felt, and that the unconscious noticed. One does not need to return to the person to honor what was experienced. The kiss becomes part of the self's unfolding, like a page in the book of one's becoming. It may be revisited in memory, not for nostalgia, but for wisdom. It may appear again in writing, in art, in inner dialogue, not as something lost, but as something still alive. The psyche does not measure experience by length or logic. It measures by depth, by meaning, by how closely a moment aligns with the inner truth. A kiss that lives on in memory is not just a sweet scene. It is a symbol, a guidepost, a fragment of the soul's deeper map. Its echo is a reminder that even in brief contact, something eternal can be touched. And once touched, it becomes part of the story the soul tells as it continues on its quiet path toward wholeness.